Well, hey guys, so I thought we'd finally do it and we'd finally have a conversation about the spinner rig, or the Ronnie rig if you prefer, but this rig itself is a deadly carp catching machine. And yes, a very simple rig, very basic mechanics on there, but it does seem to catch a lot of carp. So this is one rig that's super blown up over the last few years in the publications. This is a rig that's become very successful and it does tend to be in everyone's armory these days. And there are good reasons for it, because it presents beautifully as a pop-up rig. It is very low profile, so if you are fishing over a bed of bait, then those fish are down there feeding. It's not far off the deck, so you've got a very good chance of hooking them. And it is a very successful rig because it's very simple, very strong, paired with a good sharp hook and a nice heavy lead. Then this is going to send that hook home every single time. So it is, like I say, it's a very successful rig over the last few years, but there are pros and there are cons to the rig. Like every rig, they should always be fished in the right situation. And yeah, done successfully, this can be a really, really good way to catch carp. So let's talk a little bit about when I'll start to use this rig. I don't tend to use this rig a hell of a lot. Let's be honest about it. My favorite rig for pop-ups is not this rig. So the situations where I will tend to use this rig tend to be late spring. The fish have already woken up from their winter slumbers and they are ready to feed up again and they're getting ready for that spawning session. So over that period, I'll start to introduce a little bit more bait than I would usually throughout the winter months. And it tends to be quite a boilie only approach with a bit of crumb and a few halves and chopped boilies. And I do tend to still fish pop-ups, but I want them to be quite low profile over this period because I want the fish to be getting down and feeding on that bait. That sort of approach is when the Ronnie rig lends itself perfectly, because as you'll see, it is a very low profile rig. It sits very, very low to the deck because you've got essentially a Ronnie swivel just under here, unless you're using a quick change swivel like they used to be done. And then you've got the top of the hook, you've got a micro ring swivel and your hook bait just sits perfectly above it. Some people have it further around the shank of the hook, but for me, I prefer it right here, just on the bend of the hook. So it sets that really aggressive angle. So when the fish blows the hook back out, that is going to be sending that hook down into the lip. But you can see it's a very, very low profile rig and it sits probably 1.5 inches off the deck. I go for a very aggressive pattern of hook, and this is, so that braid there is what we call tank braid, and it's essentially, it's an uncoated braid, but it is impregnated. So it's basically, it's got some tungsten inside it and it makes it very heavy. So it sinks down really nicely. It's still supple enough to follow the contours of the lake bed. So this has got just enough kick in it, just to kick it away from the lead so you're not getting tangled up. I've never had this stuff tangle on me. It is a fantastic material to be working with as a boom section for any of these rigs. So the rig itself, like I say, is really low profile this end, and in total with the boom section, it probably sits at about 6 inches long. I don't fish them very long, and the reason for that is because I want it to set that hook as soon as possible. And like I say, I'm fishing low to the deck over a bed of bait at this time of year, and that is when this rig comes into its own. The other times when I'll be fishing this rig tend to be like late summer going into autumn, again when I'm fishing over quite a bit of bait. Over that period I do tend to feed up quite a bit, so I will be putting out quite a bit of bait over my spots. And I do tend to fish with a rig that's sort of on the deck with a wafter and a pop-up on another rig, just to sort of chop and change and go between and figure out where I'm going to be snagging them from, because some fish tend to approach from different angles, different heights, and some fish are a bit wearier than others. So if you've got options on the spot at this period when they've been hammered all summer, then you've got a really good chance of catching them as well. So I'll be fishing it over that time as well. A lot of people fish this rig right through the year, but for myself, I've got other rigs that I prefer over that period. And there are other situations also where I won't prefer this rig, and that tends to be throughout the winter and in early spring. So for that period, then I will be switching over and I will be fishing my favorite hinge stiff rig. So as you can see there, that is a much higher profile pop-up rig, and that sits at about 3 inches off the deck. So that's actually quite high. And these days you don't tend to see that as much. Again, it's the same boom section as the other rig, but it's just a long stiffened piece of monofilament line, and that is sat there with a nice visual pop-up. And there's quite a bit of separation between the hook and the hook bait. So the reason that I like a higher profile rig over this period of time is because in winter I'm searching and finding those fish. So what I'll be doing is I'll be casting out, fanning my rigs around the lake, and I'll be fishing for liners and I'll be trying to find the fish. And I tend to fish over these periods slightly deeper waters, and I'll be casting out sort of mid-water on a lake, finding out those waters that are anywhere sort of between 6 foot and maybe 15 to 30 foot. So quite deep waters, and one of the lakes I fish is very deep in the middle, so I do tend to fish that quite a lot with these style of rigs, because if you've got a rig that's a little bit of a higher profile with a nice bright hook bait on, then they will see that hook bait for miles. There's a lot of separation between the hook bait and the lake bed, that it does become very plain and visual, as where if you've got a really low profile hook bait, then it does become a little bit more blended in with the background, and I do tend to find I don't hook as many fish over that period. But yeah, I like to find the fish a little bit better with this rig, and then like I say, in spring, in early spring, when those fish are just waking up, then I will still fish sort of the hinge stiff rig or zig rigs, and I'll be topping them with maggots and just really soluble, high attract hook baits, things that are going to just draw those fish in but not feed them up. So that's the fantastic way of doing it. So there we go, you can fish this one the same. You can attach some bait floss through here, pop a few maggots or some worms on top and fish that with naturals as well. For me, I do prefer the other rigs to seek out and find those fish through those really cold months. But this one for me is a fantastic rig for catching them when you are fishing over a bit of bait and you're getting those fish coming right down low to the lake bed to feed. Then that's when a really low profile hook bait really comes into its own. And like I say, I'm fishing this one. As you see, the pattern of hook that I'm using here is a very aggressive pattern of hook, and it's a little bit unique in its shape, and I do tend to find that this works really, really well with pop-ups and wafters, this hook pattern. So my hook of choice for this rig is the Wild X900 hook from Capellan. These ones here, fantastic hooks, and they have become one of my favorite hooks of all time. Yes, they're a very aggressive hook. It's quite a short shank on it, but it's a very, very wide aggressive gape on the hook. So as you can see there, this hook is quite a short shanked hook, but it's a very, very wide aggressive angle as it kicks out and around. It's only a size 6 hook, but it's got about the gape of a size 4, maybe a size 2, and I don't find any problem with carp taking them, even the small ones. So I've caught doubles on these and it's been no problem at all, but they've just been very, very strong and very, very reliable. These hooks are tack sharp, and that's all I want from a simple rig like this. It's just sharp, strong and reliable. You see that aggressive angle as it kicks up and back down on itself, and it's almost like a circle hook, the way that it can rock into the fish's mouth and stay in there. So as you'll see, this rig is made up from very, very simple components. Pretty much everyone on the planet has seen this rig by now, I would imagine, over the last few years of the amount it gets hammered in magazines and videos. So I won't break this one down in too much detail, but you guys can find it out there yourselves. The only thing different for me is the pattern of hook, but yeah, it's as simple as it comes for a rig. You've got a hook, you have a hook bead, you have a micro ring swivel, you have the little spinner swivel, or you can go for a QC swivel, and then you just have a bit of line. So you can fish that with monofilament line, you can fish it with fluorocarbon line, or you can fish it with a braid, and all of them will work. I do prefer myself, I prefer this braid because it's supple and it's soft and it goes over the lake bed perfectly, and also it doesn't tangle. So yeah, this is my preference, but you guys can fish whatever you like. Some people like to fish them with quite a stiff boom section, and then when you're fishing them on, say, a heli system, then they kick away nicely, that kind of thing. But for me, I like my rigs to sort of settle down over every bit of debris on the bottom, and then my rig is always presented perfectly. So yeah, this is my version of the Ronnie rig, but I'm sure everyone else on the planet is fishing it very, very similar to this. So I won't go into it too much detail. This is the rig to go for if you're fishing over a bit of bait and you want a low profile pop-up. So key things to remember: if you're fishing a low profile hook bait and you want to fish it over a bed of bait, then the Ronnie rig is the perfect rig to go for. But if you are fishing those cold months, spring and winter, and you want to seek out and find those fish, then go for a higher profile hook bait like this one here. And that's about it, really. So if you guys liked watching this video, then make sure you give it the thumbs up, like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one.